All right, next let's cover a little bit about erosion. And let's start by talking about moving water, or what we call stream erosion. Sometimes in physical geography, we also call this fluvial erosion. So this erosion is about the movement, transportation, and deposition of rock over a wide area. And the way that happens most commonly is by rivers, streams. And when erosion really has three parts to it. You have the actual erosion itself. That's the detachment and removal of the rock material. But then there's two other aspects to it. One is that it then moves the material or transports it. So there's the transportation. And different, fast-moving water can move more material than slow-moving water. Bigger rivers move more material than smaller ones. And then lastly, we have the deposition, or the leaving of the material in some other place. And the deposits are called alluvium. And one thing we'll mention is that the Central Valley is just basically a big bowl of alluvium, or deposited stream material. And depending on, so you have two different things happening. You have erosion, taking away, and deposition, adding to a place. And if you're doing more erosion, that's called degradation. So this is what's going to lower the landscape. So because of gravity and the fast-moving streams of the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Ranges, they are impacted more by degradation. They are actually getting smaller over time because of the movement of the material away from these mountains. But it has to go somewhere, so it moves away from the mountains, and much of that gets deposited in the Central Valley. So if you have more deposition, like in the Central Valley, you have what's called aggradation. So while the Sierra Nevada and the Coast Ranges are slowly shrinking, the Central Valley is slowly filling in and growing. Just a quick note, you have different kinds of streams and different kinds of elevations. That in the high mountain ranges, like in the high Sierras, you have what are streams that are very straight. They're relatively straight, and they form these deep river gorges, V-shaped valleys, and they're very powerful. They erode downward through the rock. As they move away out of the high elevations, they start to curve a little bit. They form what's called sinuous streams that just have a little bit of a curve to them. And then when they get down to the valley floor, like in the Central Valley, they start to meander or move side to side. So high in the mountains, they're eroding downward, but as they get to the valley floor, they're wiggling from side to side and they're eroding sideways. So up in the high elevations, you have deep river gorges, or what we call V-shaped valleys. If you saw the video on Yosemite Valley, that would be the example like near El Portal, where they had the river rafting and the river was cutting that deep V shape. That starts to ease up as you move out of the mountains and you start to gain a little bit of curve to the stream. And that increases even more once you get to the lower elevations, the flatlands of the valley. And so here the rivers meander even more and start to erode sideways rather than erode downward. Why do they move sideways? Well, as they are, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So as the river is moving, it'll move faster on one side and slower on the other. And the slow side, it starts to deposit material, and on the fast side, it erodes more material. So you can start off with a stream that is a little bit curved, but that curve will increase over time. As it increases, sometimes it can be too much, and you can actually, the river can actually break through and abandon part of its channel in what's called an oxbow lake.